They say love conquers all. They say when two people are meant to be together, the world bows down to their love. But they are wrong. The world doesn't bow down. The world fights back, especially when that world is built on cold, hard cash and dark family secrets. My name is Sarah, and this isn't just a story about my best friend, Daniel, and the love of his life, Elena. This is a story about how a family's pride can turn a beautiful dream into a living nightmare. It is a story about how far people will go to protect their status, and how much further a broken heart will go to get absolute, crushing revenge. I still remember the day Daniel told me he was marrying Elena. We were sitting in our usual coffee shop, the rain tapping gently against the glass window. Daniel was beaming. His eyes had a spark I hadn't seen in years. Daniel came from old money. His family, the Sterling family, owned half the real estate in the city. They lived in a mansion that looked more like a museum than a home. They judged people by the brand of their watch and the history of their last name. And then there was Elena. Elena was an orphan. She grew up in a humble neighborhood, working 2 jobs just to pay for her nursing degree. She didn't have a prestigious last name. She didn't have a trust fund, but she had a heart of pure gold. When she looked at Daniel, she didn't see his family's millions. She just saw Daniel, the kind, funny, protective man who loved her for exactly who she was. "Sarah," she said yes, Daniel had whispered to me that rainy afternoon, holding up a picture of Elena wearing a simple silver band. "My parents are going to hate it, but I don't care. I love her more than life itself." I smiled, but deep down, a cold shiver ran down my spine. I knew Daniel's mother, Eleanor Sterling. She was a woman carved out of ice. To Eleanor, appearance was everything. I knew she would never let a girl from the working class walk into her family without a fight. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Daniel?" I asked him, my voice filled with worry. "Your family, they can be brutal." Daniel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We are married, Sarah. We did it quietly at the courthouse yesterday. They can't change it now. They will just have to accept her." But they didn't accept her. They never intended to. A week later, Daniel invited me to the Sterling mansion. His parents had called for a family dinner to welcome Elena. Daniel was naive. He thought his parents were finally giving in. But when Elena and Daniel walked through those massive double doors, the atmosphere in that house was freezing. Elena looked beautiful. She wore a simple, elegant navy blue dress she had saved up to buy. She was nervous, her hands trembling slightly as she held Daniel's arm. Eleanor Sterling was standing at the top of the grand staircase. She didn't come down to greet them. She just looked down, her eyes scanning Elena from head to toe like a judge looking at a criminal. "So," Eleanor's sharp voice echoed through the empty hallway, "this is the girl who thinks she can buy her way into our history." That was just the first sentence. That was just the beginning of the humiliation. Little did Elena know, she wasn't entering a family. She was walking straight into a trap designed to break her spirit, piece by piece. The dining room looked like something out of a royal palace. A long mahogany table, silver cutlery that caught the light of the massive crystal chandelier, and servants standing quietly in the corners. Daniel sat next to Elena, holding her hand under the table. I sat across from them, feeling the heavy, suffocating tension in the room. Daniel's father, Charles Sterling, sat at the head of the table, reading a business newspaper, completely ignoring Elena's presence. When the food was served, Eleanor finally spoke. Her tone was polite, but her words were laced with pure poison. "So, Elena," Eleanor began, swirling the wine in her glass, "Daniel tells me you are a nurse. Tell me, what do your parents do? We haven't had the chance to meet them. Which country club do they belong to?" Elena swallowed hard. She looked at Daniel, then looked at Eleanor, trying her best to keep a brave smile on her face. "My parents passed away when I was very young, Mrs. Sterling. I was raised by my aunt in the Southern District. She passed away last year. I don't have much family left." Eleanor let out a soft, mocking laugh. "An orphan from the Southern District. How charming. Quite a leap from a crowded apartment to a historic estate, isn't it? Tell me, did you find Daniel at the hospital? Or did you specifically target him at the charity gala? Daniel's face turned bright red. Mother, stop it. Elena didn't target anyone. We met because we love each other. Love, Charles Sterling finally spoke, closing his newspaper with a loud thud. Love doesn't pay the property taxes on this estate, Daniel. Love doesn't protect our shares in the market. You made a foolish, impulsive decision. You married outside your circle. She is my wife, Daniel shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Elena looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Tears were welling up in her eyes. She reached out and touched Daniel's arm, whispering, Daniel, please. It's okay. No, it's not okay, Eleanor said, leaning forward. Her eyes turned dangerous. Let's be honest here, Elena. You saw a rich boy, and you grabbed him. But let me make one thing very clear to you. You might have a legal piece of paper that says you are a Sterling, but in this house, you are nothing. You do not belong here. You will never wear the Sterling family jewels, and you will never see a single penny of this family's fortune. Elena couldn't take it anymore. She stood up, a tear finally escaping and running down her cheek. Excuse me, she whispered, before running out of the dining room towards the gardens. Daniel stood up to follow her, but Charles's voice boomed through the room. If you walk out of that door after her tonight, Daniel, your access to the company accounts will be frozen by tomorrow morning. Choose wisely. Daniel froze. For a second, I saw hesitation in his eyes, and that hesitation broke my heart. He didn't run immediately. He looked at his father, then at the door, calculating the cost of his love. Eventually, he ran after her, but the damage was done. The Sterlings knew Daniel's weakness. They knew he loved the money just as much as he loved Elena, and they were going to use that weakness to destroy their marriage. 6 months passed. Daniel and Elena moved into a smaller apartment away from the mansion. For a while, things seemed peaceful, but the Sterlings hadn't given up. They had just changed their strategy. Instead of attacking Elena openly, they started a slow, psychological war against her. Every family event, every public gala, every business dinner, Elena was either intentionally uninvited, or if she was invited, she was subjected to cruel games. I remember the annual Sterling Charity Gala. It was the biggest event of the year. Daniel insisted that Elena attend with him. He bought her a beautiful dress, trying to make her feel special. But when they arrived, Eleanor had already instructed the event coordinators. Elena's name wasn't on the VIP seating list. While Daniel was pulled away by his father to meet high-profile investors, Elena was guided by the staff to the very back of the hall, seated at a table with the catering staff and event photographers. When Elena tried to walk over to Daniel, Eleanor intercepted her. "Elena, darling," Eleanor said loudly, ensuring the wealthy women around her could hear. "Please don't embarrass Daniel tonight. He is speaking with the mayor. You wouldn't want people asking why his wife smells like hospital disinfectant, would you? Go sit in the back where you belong." The women around Eleanor snickered. Elena stood there, completely isolated, humiliated in front of hundreds of people. When she looked across the room at Daniel, he was laughing with a group of wealthy socialites. He didn't even look back to check on her. That was the night things began to change. Daniel was changing. The pressure from his parents was working. They were constantly whispering in his ear, telling him that Elena was holding him back, that his friends were laughing at him behind his back because of his charity case wife. Elena started losing weight. The bright, cheerful nurse who used to sing while cooking was gone. In her place was a quiet, exhausted woman who sat by the window, waiting for a husband who was coming home later and later every night. One evening, I visited Elena at their apartment. Daniel wasn't home. Elena was sitting on the kitchen floor, surrounded by old family photos of her aunt. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe. "Sarah," she sobbed, gripping my hand. "I can't do this anymore. I love Daniel, but his family is destroying my soul. And the worst part is, Daniel is starting to look at me the same way they do, like I'm a mistake, like I'm a burden." I held her close, feeling a deep, burning anger in my chest. "Elena, you need to stand up to them. You can't let them do this to you." "I try, Sarah. I try so hard," she whispered. But how do you fight people who own everything? How do you fight people who can buy the truth? She didn't know it yet, but the ultimate betrayal was just around the corner. A betrayal so deep that it would completely shatter her world, leaving her with no choice but to transform from a victim into a force of absolute destruction. It happened on a cold Tuesday winter evening. Elena called me, her voice trembling so much I could barely understand her. "Sarah, come to the hospital, please. They took it all." When I rushed to the hospital, I found Elena sitting in a stark, white waiting room. She looked ghost-like. Her eyes were red, staring blankly at the wall. That afternoon, Elena had received a call from Eleanor. Eleanor had claimed she wanted to fix things. She asked Elena to meet her at a private penthouse downtown to discuss a peace offering. Elena, desperate to save her marriage and ease the tension, agreed. But when Elena arrived at the penthouse, Daniel wasn't there. Only Eleanor and two men in expensive suits were waiting. Eleanor didn't offer peace. She offered a contract, a divorce agreement. "Sign it," Eleanor had said, throwing a pen on the glass table. "Daniel has already agreed. He knows his future is with the company, not with you. Sign it, and we will give you $50,000 to disappear." Elena had refused. "Daniel would never do this. He loves me. I want to speak to my husband." Eleanor smiled a cold, victorious smile. "You think he loves you? Look at this." She played a video on her phone. It was Daniel sitting in his father's office just the night before. In the video, Charles asked him, "Are you ready to fix this mistake and get back into the lineage?" And Daniel, looking tired and defeated, replied, "Yes, father. Do whatever it takes. I can't live like this anymore." Elena's heart shattered into a million pieces. The man she had given up her peace for, the man she loved with all her heart, had traded her for his inheritance. When Elena stood up to leave, refusing to sign, Eleanor signaled the two men. They grabbed Elena, forcing her into a chair. They didn't hit her, but they used psychological terror. They threatened her. They told her that if she didn't sign, they would use their immense power to revoke her nursing license, frame her for stealing hospital medication, and ensure she spent the rest of her life in a jail cell. "We own the police, Elena. We own the courts," Eleanor whispered in her ear. "You are a nobody. Nobody will look for you. Nobody will believe you." Terrified, exhausted, and completely broken by Daniel's betrayal, Elena's hand shook as she signed the papers. They took the document, threw her out of the building into the freezing rain, and left her on the street like trash. When I heard the story, my blood boiled. I wanted to go to the Sterling mansion and tear it down brick by brick. But Elena caught my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly tight. She wasn't crying anymore. The tears had dried on her pale skin. Her eyes, which had been full of sadness for months, suddenly turned cold. A dark, terrifying focus took over her face. "No, Sarah," Elena said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "No more crying. They think they can use their wealth to erase me? They think they can buy the world and escape the consequences? They forgot one thing. I am a nurse. I know exactly where the pressure points are. I know how to make someone bleed without ever lifting a weapon." The sweet, gentle Elena died in that room that night, and a mastermind was born. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and Elena was prepared to let it freeze. She knew she couldn't fight the Sterlings in an open war. They had too much money, too many high-priced lawyers, and too much influence. To destroy an empire like the Sterlings, she had to destroy it from the inside out. She had to use their own greed, their own pride, and their own dirty secrets against them. Elena moved into my apartment. For the next 3 months, she didn't look like a grieving ex-wife. She looked like a general preparing for battle. First, we needed information. The Sterlings presented themselves as perfect, law-abiding pillars of society. But nobody gets that rich without cutting corners. Elena used her connections at the hospital. Over the years, many high-profile elites visited the private wing where she worked. She reached out to a trusted senior IT administrator at the hospital who owed her a life-saving favor from years ago. Together, they started digging into the medical and financial records of the Sterling family's private charity foundation, the very foundation they used to clean their money and evade taxes. What we found was shocking. The Sterling Charity Foundation claimed to donate millions to medical research and orphanages every year. But on paper, those millions were being funneled into offshore shell companies in the Cayman Islands. They were using a fake medical supplies company to launder money from illegal offshore investments. But that wasn't all. Elena found something even more devastating. Charles Sterling was suffering from an early-stage cognitive illness. He had been secretly visiting a private specialist under a fake name to hide his condition from the board of directors. If the shareholders found out that the CEO of Sterling Enterprises was losing his mental capacity, the stock would crash, and the family would lose control of the company overnight. "Look at this, Sarah," Elena said, pointing at the financial balance sheets and medical reports spread across my living room floor. "They built their castle on a foundation of lies. They are terrified of the truth. So we are going to give them the truth, in the most public way possible." "What about Daniel?" I asked, watching her face carefully. Elena's expression didn't change. "Daniel chose his cage. Now, he will watch it burn." Elena didn't rush. She waited for the perfect moment. And that moment arrived when the Sterlings announced a massive televised press conference to launch their new multi-billion-dollar international real estate project. The event would be attended by the city's top politicians, foreign investors, and every major news outlet. It was the peak of their success, the moment they felt completely invincible. Elena smiled as she bought a VIP ticket to the event under an assumed corporate name. The stage was set. The trap was about to spring. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was packed, glittering lights, cameras flashing, and hundreds of people in black tie attire. On the main stage, a massive digital screen displayed the logo of Sterling Enterprises. Charles, Eleanor, and Daniel stood on the stage, smiling for the cameras. Daniel looked handsome in his tuxedo, but there was an emptiness in his eyes. He looked like a puppet performing for his parents. He had his money back, but he had lost his soul. Charles Sterling stepped up to the podium. He cleared his throat, looking proud and powerful. "Ladies and gentlemen, today marks a historic milestone for the Sterling family. Our new global venture will redefine the skyline of this city." As Charles continued his speech, the heavy wooden doors at the back of the ballroom slowly opened. Elena walked in. She didn't wear a simple dress this time. She wore a stunning, razor-sharp white suit. Her dark hair was perfectly styled, and her posture was commanding. She walked down the center aisle with absolute confidence. The sheer power of her presence caused people to turn around and whisper. I was sitting in the media section, holding the master control remote for the ballroom's digital network. A remote we had secured by bribing a tech coordinator who hated the Sterling family's arrogant behavior. Daniel saw her first. His face went completely pale. His microphone picked up his sharp intake of breath. Eleanor's smile froze on her face. Her eyes turned wide with shock and fury. She whispered something to the security guards standing near the stage. 2 large security guards immediately moved to intercept Elena. But Elena didn't stop. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small, highly sensitive wireless microphone, and switched it on. Her voice cut through Charles's speech, booming out of every speaker in the ballroom. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." Elena's voice was calm, clear, and terrifyingly steady. "Before Mr. Sterling sells you a dream built on stolen money, I think the investors have a right to see the real balance sheet." "Get her out of here!" Eleanor screamed from the stage, dropping her polite facade. "She is a trespasser. She is mentally unstable." The security guards grabbed Elena's arms, but she didn't fight back. She looked directly into the main television camera that was broadcasting live to the entire city. "Sarah, now," she whispered into her microphone. I pressed the button on the remote. Instantly, the beautiful promotional video of the Sterling real estate project vanished from the massive digital screen. In its place, giant documents appeared. Medical files, tax evasion records, bank transfers to offshore accounts, and the signed illegal divorce coercion agreement with Eleanor's signature clearly visible. The entire ballroom went completely silent. The only sound was the continuous flashing of press cameras. The trap had closed. The chaos that followed was glorious. The digital screen displayed the offshore bank account numbers, showing exactly how the Sterling Charity Foundation had stolen money meant for children's hospitals. Right next to it was Charles Sterling's official psychiatric evaluation, proving he had been falsifying corporate decisions while legally incompetent. The reporters in the room didn't look at the stage anymore. They turned their cameras towards the screen, taking hundreds of photos. Foreign investors began whispering angrily, standing up from their front row seats and walking out of the hall. "Turn it off! Turn it off right now!" Charles shouted into his podium microphone, his face turning dangerously red. He began to cough, his hands shaking violently as the stress triggered his medical condition right in front of the cameras. He stumbled backward, barely caught by Daniel. Eleanor rushed to the front of the stage, pointing a trembling finger at Elena. "This is a lie. This is fabricated by a bitter, poor girl whom we threw out. Security, lock her up." Elena stood her ground, looking up at Eleanor with a cold, triumphant smile. "You told me you owned the police and the courts, Eleanor. You told me a nobody like me could never fight you. But you forgot one thing. You don't own the public. And you don't own the internet." Right at that moment, the heavy doors opened again. This time, it wasn't security. It was 4 federal agents from the Financial Crimes Division, accompanied by local police officers. They hadn't come for Elena. They had been tipped off by Elena 3 hours prior, with a complete digital file of evidence delivered directly to the federal prosecutor's office. The lead agent walked right past Elena, stepped onto the stage, and showed his badge to Charles and Eleanor. "Charles Sterling, Eleanor Sterling, you are under arrest for federal tax fraud, money laundering, and corporate forgery. Please come with us." The ballroom erupted into absolute madness. Flashbulbs blinded the family as the federal agents placed handcuffs on Eleanor Sterling. The woman who thought she was a queen, the woman who thought she could treat human beings like trash, was being dragged down the stage in handcuffs, her expensive jewelry clinking against the cold steel. Daniel stood there, completely untouched by the police, but completely destroyed by the reality. He looked down at Elena. His eyes were wide with a mixture of shock, regret, and terror. He took a step towards the edge of the stage. "Elena," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Please, what have you done?" Elena looked at him. For a brief second, I wondered if she felt any pity for the man she once loved. But her face remained as hard as stone. She walked closer to the stage, looking up at him. "I didn't do this, Daniel," she said softly, her voice echoing through the quiet spaces of the room. "Your family did this, and you watched them do it. You chose the money. I hope it keeps you warm at night." The downfall of the Sterling family was swift and merciless. Within 48 hours, the news of their financial corruption and corporate fraud was headline news across the nation. The stock value of Sterling Enterprises plummeted by 80% in a single week. The board of directors immediately voted to remove Charles Sterling from his position, citing his hidden medical condition and illegal activities. The mansion, the grand golden cage where Elena had been so deeply humiliated, was seized by federal authorities to pay off the massive fines and back taxes the family owed. Eleanor Sterling's pride was her ultimate undoing. She couldn't handle the humiliation of a public trial. She spent all her remaining personal funds on high-priced lawyers, but the evidence Elena had gathered was airtight. There were no loopholes. There were no favors left to call in. The elites who used to drink her expensive wine and attend her galas completely vanished, refusing to answer her calls. They didn't want to be associated with a sinking ship. And then there was Daniel. Because he hadn't directly signed the financial fraud documents, he avoided prison time. But he lost everything else. The bank accounts were frozen. The cars were repossessed. The luxury lifestyle he had traded his wife for disappeared overnight. He went from being the heir of a multi-billion-dollar empire to a man with a ruined family name and massive personal debts. One afternoon, a month after the scandal, Elena and I were packing up her things from my apartment. She had received a job offer as a chief nursing administrator at a prestigious international medical research center in another city. She was starting a new life, a life built on her own merit, honor, and hard work. The doorbell rang. I opened the door and my jaw dropped. It was Daniel. He looked unrecognizable. He had lost weight, his clothes were wrinkled, and he hadn't shaved in weeks. The arrogant, wealthy boy was gone. In his place stood a broken soul. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Please, can I speak to Elena? Just for 1 minute." Before I could answer, Elena walked to the door. She looked at him calmly. She didn't look angry. She didn't look sad. She looked completely indifferent. And indifference is worse than hatred. It means you no longer care if the person exists. "What do you want, Daniel?" she asked quietly. Daniel fell to his knees right there in the hallway. Tears streamed down his face as he grabbed the hem of her jacket. "Elena, I am so sorry. I was a coward. My parents threatened to ruin me, and I panicked. I never stopped loving you. Please, give me one more chance. We can start over. We can leave this city. Just you and me." Elena looked down at him, then gently but firmly pulled her jacket away from his grip. "Start over?" she asked, a faint, sad smile appearing on her lips. "Daniel, when your mother forced me to sign those papers, when she threatened my life and my career, you knew about it. You watched the video. You let them throw me out into the rain. You didn't care if I survived or died, as long as your inheritance was safe." "I was wrong," he sobbed. "I regret it every single day." "Regret is what people feel when they get caught, Daniel," Elena said, her voice full of finality. "If your family's project had succeeded, if you were still sitting on your millions, you wouldn't be on your knees in this hallway today. You are not sorry you hurt me. You are just sorry that you are poor." She took a step back and began to close the door. "Elena, please," Daniel cried out as the door began to shut. "Goodbye, Daniel," she whispered. The click of the lock echoing through the quiet apartment was the sound of the final chapter closing on the Sterling family. They had tried to break her wings, but in the end, she was the one who flew away while their empire burned to ash. True victory isn't just about destroying your enemies. It is about building a life so beautiful that your enemies become completely irrelevant to your existence. Elena left the city the very next day. She didn't take a single cent of the Sterling money. She didn't want their dirty wealth. She took her nursing degree, her dignity, and her untarnished honor. 2 years passed. I went to visit Elena in her new city. She was living in a beautiful, sunlit cottage near the coast. She was now the head of a major regional healthcare program, respected by her colleagues and loved by her patients. She looked radiant. The pale, tired skin and emotional, tearful eyes from 2 years ago were completely gone. She was whole again. As we sat on her porch, drinking tea and watching the waves crash against the shore, I told her about the latest news from our old hometown. Charles Sterling had been placed in a permanent state-run care facility, his health completely broken. Eleanor Sterling was serving a 7-year sentence in a federal minimum security prison. And Daniel? Daniel was working a low-paying job as a clerk in a local real estate office, living in a tiny, cramped apartment in the very southern district he used to mock. He was living the exact life he had looked down upon. Elena listened quietly, holding her tea mug. She didn't cheer. She didn't smile with malice. She just took a deep breath of the fresh ocean air. "Do you ever think about them, Elena?" I asked her softly. "Sometimes," she replied, looking out at the horizon. "But not with anger anymore. In a strange way, their cruelty forced me to find my own strength. They thought power came from money and a family crest. They didn't realize that real power comes from resilience. It comes from the ability to stand back up when the world tries to crush you." She turned to me, her eyes bright and filled with peace. "They tried to bury me, Sarah. They just didn't know I was a seed. Every story has a beginning, and every story has an end. But the lessons we learn from them stay with us forever." The story of Daniel and Elena is a powerful reminder that arrogance and wealth are nothing more than a fragile shield. You can buy expensive clothes, you can buy large mansions, and you can buy people's silence for a little while. But you can never buy a pure soul, and you can never escape the universal law of justice. When you choose to humiliate someone because they have less than you are not showing your strength. You are exposing your deepest insecurity. The Sterlings thought they were protected by their golden walls, but those very walls became their prison. Daniel thought his money could replace the love of a loyal woman, but he ended up with neither. If you are going through a time where people are treating you like trash, if you are being humiliated by those who think they are superior, remember Elena. Do not lose your mind in anger. Do not break down in despair. Gather your strength in silence. Build your foundation on truth and hard work. Because when the time comes, the truth will speak louder than millions of dollars. As the sun sets over the ocean, casting a golden light over Elena's beautiful new home, one thing is absolutely certain. Justice doesn't always arrive with a loud thunder. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the hands of a person everyone ignored, proving that no empire is too big to fall when it is built on cruelty. Thank you for listening to this episode of Revenge Episodes. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that justice always wins in the end, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever seen someone's pride destroy them? Let us know. Stay strong, stay fair, and we will see you in the next episode.